Please be seated. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, good morning. This was a good Sunday for me because usually I don't really have anything to say, but today there's two things I said, should I preach on the gospel or one of the saints? There's a recent saint, Saint Joseph the Hesychast, who's very interesting and responsible really for the reflowering of the communal monastic life, Amanathos, since the 80s. He was before the 80s, but it was his spiritual children who continued that. But I chose instead to preach on the gospel. And the reason for this is if we're concerned with our salvation and ultimately with what happens to us and our soul for eternity, this gospel is very, very important for us to listen to. Because Christ talks about the kingdom of heaven, and he says in here essentially that there is something we can do that will exclude us from the kingdom of heaven, from the presence of God after this life. So we need to know what that is, and we need to take it seriously. This is, in my mind, one of the most serious gospel lessons that we hear, and one of the most serious commandments of the Lord. And unfortunately, it's one of the ones that we seem to have the hardest time actually doing. So what is it? What did we learn in the gospel? We learn about a man who owes a great, great debt. And he goes to the person he owes the debt to, and the person says, well, according to all this debt, we take you and your wife and your children, and we sell everything you have until the debt's paid. And the man is, of course, shaken, and he falls on his knees, and he asks the Lord, have mercy on me. And he forgives him the debt. He forgives him the debt. This, of course, represents us with God. But then the man goes out, and he has other people who owed him stuff, much less, but they owed him things. And he goes and he collects them, and he's ready to throw them in prison if they won't pay him. And when they ask for mercy, he doesn't give it. He received mercy from his Lord, and he doesn't give it to other people. And then the two striking things in this gospel come at the very end. It says that the Lord, so the guy on top who'd forgiven the debt, said in anger. We typically don't think of God as angry, but we have to remember that God is our Father. Imagine if you had your children arguing with one another, and you showed kindness to one of them, and then they wouldn't show it to each other. That would be upsetting in a way that's somewhat righteous, because they're not doing the right thing, and your job is to teach them what's right. And so this Lord, the Lord in anger, does what? He condemns the man who he'd forgiven to prison. And what Christ says at the end of this, aside from the word anger, he says that this is what will happen to everyone who does not forgive his brother from his heart. So he's telling us what will happen. This isn't a mystery. If you ask me, if I make it to my deathbed and I go to close my eyes and there's, I've done a good job and I pretty much lived my life in a Christian way, and there's someone that I just couldn't get myself to forgive, I could only point you to this gospel where Christ says, everyone who does not forgive his brother from his heart will not enter the kingdom of heaven. This is extremely important and serious. So how do we do it? How do we do it? Because I find in myself and in my pastoral ministry interactions with people that generally we are pretty good at forgiving people because they sinned, because they did something. We're good at forgiving something that they did wrong. Okay, we're good at forgiving a sin someone committed, but we're not good at forgiving someone for the fact that they sin. There's a distinction here. I can forgive my brother for stealing my car, But once he does that, I'll forgive, but I won't forget. And I'll know that my brother's a thief and that I can't really trust him. And he, in my eyes, he will move from being one sort of person in my life to being something else. I forgive his sin, the specific sin, but I don't forgive the fact that he's a sinner. I hold on to that. I think that I'm somehow better than him. He's a different category now of person. And this is a dangerous thing for us to do. And when I look at the saints and I look at the teachings of the church, there's essentially two things that we can do, because I believe this is something that most people struggle with once you're old enough to have something to forgive. The two things that the saints do to help them really forgive their brother and sister from their heart are, one, they have to see the virtue in others, and two, they have to get to know, have the courage to get to know their own weakness and their own failings. How do we see the virtue in others? Two things that have always stuck with me, and I heard these at the seminary. One is a simple quote. Everyone is the hero of their own story. Everyone's the hero of their own story. We have to assume that people are trying their best, given what they know, what they're able to do, what support they have or don't have. We have to assume that our brothers and sisters are trying their best. That in their story, when they make their decisions, when they act how they act, they're doing what they can. They're the hero of their own story. And the truth is that's usually how we see ourselves. It's very rare for us to not see ourselves like that, as I did my best, I'm trying, I made a mistake, right? But I'm trying. We're the hero of our own story. We need to let others be the hero of their story. Another concept that helped me from seminary comes from the field of ethics, and it's called moral luck. Moral luck. We often look at the way someone behaves and we attribute it to their character, when in fact, often, the way someone behaves, let's say someone who's ended up in and out of the prison system, may often be better attributed not to who they are as a character, but to their moral luck of perhaps having been born into poverty, of having no other way forward than crime, of having seen no other examples, of having for their own safety to had to get involved in something. There's circumstances that dictate people's behavior that we're often unaware of. And we tend to think that if we were in their shoes, we wouldn't do that. I wouldn't have ended up in prison. Personally, I think that's sort of arrogant. We have so many blessings in our life, and it's very easy to judge someone for one thing they did without knowing the story. But really, we have no idea what we would do in their shoes. And in fact, the more Christian stance is to have some humility and to even look at them as a hero in their own story, and to say, if I was in their shoes, I might have done even worse. Everyone's the hero in their own story. Everyone is trying their best. And our character, what we see as virtues, are not necessarily always, just what's inside of us, but they come from all the support and love we have around us. And when someone has a weakness, a failing, a shortcoming, when they commit a sin, it may be attributed not to their character, and we shouldn't do that, but to the way they grew up, to whatever's around them, to essentially their moral luck. I think if we can take these two concepts, and whenever we see someone, in whatever situation, whether they're distant to us or someone near to us, we should try, as St. Paisios says, to make our minds factories of good thoughts. Of good thoughts. This, I'm thinking of this now. Does anyone know the story, the play, Les Miserables? Yeah. So that whole story is sort of about moral luck. It's a man who steals bread to feed someone. And then he's just cast the rest of his life as a criminal. And he really, though, was the hero of that story. So when we see anyone do anything that's questionable, we shouldn't attribute the worst to them, but we should try, if we're lucky, maybe the easiest way, not to even notice it. We shouldn't be paying attention to what others are doing and judging them. But if we do notice it, we should try to render it in a way that gives them the benefit of the doubt, that is compassionate, that is part of a factory of good thoughts rather than negative thoughts about other people. That's step one in helping us forgive. It's developing our compassion for others. In step two, which is further developing our compassion for others, is knowing ourselves, is knowing our own weakness. Because the truth is, as long as we think we're a better person than someone else, we will judge them, and if they harm us, we will not forgive them. How do we have a sense of our weakness? You know the sacrament of confession. There's a practice in the church as well, in our tradition, of every evening taking account of how we could have done our day better, standing before the icon of God, the icon of Christ, and it will probably just take 3 minutes thinking about where we went wrong and asking God for forgiveness. This will cultivate in us an awareness of our fallenness, and more importantly, it will cultivate in us an awareness of God's mercy. Because if you do that tonight, and you do it tomorrow, and you do it on Tuesday, and you come back here on Sunday, I guarantee you won't feel when you come in this church farther from God. You won't feel that in admitting who you are and your weaknesses and your failings, that He's pushed you farther. You'll feel closer to Him, and you'll feel that, you know what, I didn't need to be perfect. All I needed to do was show myself to God, and He's happy to forgive my weaknesses. And so I pray all of us, now we may have people we need to forgive, and in the future we may have people to forgive. May we not hear the words of Christ that we didn't forgive our brother or sister from our heart, but may we cultivate compassion for the other. May we learn to know ourselves. And then forgiveness will actually not be something that we have to even strive at. It will just be our natural posture when we encounter other people. We'll see the whole world as a place filled with people with good intentions, governed and controlled and held by a God who's compassionate and forgives all of our weaknesses. And so I just wish you strength. Pray for me that I may develop this lens and see everyone with love, and give me a good example by doing it yourselves. Amen.